All right, Vanessa Yurkevich there. Now, joining us live from Los Angeles is William Lee. He's the chief economist and managing director of Global Economic Advisors. Great to see you. I want to ask, you've just heard it there. You've got abysmal consumer confidence, a global energy crisis and rising energy costs, and then we don't know whether or not full combat could resume around Iran any day now. How difficult is this situation for Kevin Warsh to be inheriting right now? Can he plan when you don't know whether or not the war will reignite in full force or not any day to the next?
Well, you've just hit the issue right on the head. Kevin Warsh is coming into a situation where the economy is giving off a very mixed set of signals. The affordability problem is a real one. More and more consumers are expressing the fact that my wages just aren't keeping up with the cost of living. Every day prices are shooting up and my wages are not. And I think the real issue here is that the economy is doing incredibly well. So growth is estimated by the Atlanta Fed to be 4% pace this quarter. And yet people are finding a harder and harder time to find a job if they lose a job. But if they have a job, their wages just aren't going up fast enough. But I think the only way to really solve the affordability problem is not with interest rates, but it's rather finding jobs that are higher paying. And that is coming about because of the productivity boom that we're experiencing. As more technology is being put into place and AI is coming online, we're finding that workers are getting paid more because they're being more productive. So for those lucky workers that continue to hang on to their jobs, they're expected to have higher and higher wages and make up for the high cost of living. The unfortunate side is that more and more people are worried that they're going to lose their job because of AI. And there again, Kevin Warsh is coming in and saying, we can't solve that problem with interest rates. That's a technology problem. That's a social problem that is outside the realm of the central bank. What the central bank can do is set the environment so that we can spur on more investment and make it more productive for companies to invest in productivity enhancing investments that will allow people to be paid higher and higher salaries. So he comes in with a very big set of problems ahead of him, but he's also coming in with a reform agenda that says the Federal Reserve will have to change its way of doing business because it hasn't really been able to help the U.S. economy grow in a direction that allows more stuff to be made at lower costs and contain the inflation rate.
So you said that he could take measures to help spur further investment. What kind of measures could the Federal Reserve be making to help with that in this very difficult economic climate?
Yeah, in fact, he's been coming in with the reputation of what people call the Warsh Maneuver, which is to say he thinks he can lower interest rates if he contains the inflationary impact of lower rates by tightening up on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which is to say, if they can somehow contain the amount of liquidity that's out in the banking system that allows banks to make loans, he can charge lower price for whatever loans are made. So that maneuver allows more people to be able to have lower cost mortgages, businesses to have lower price loans, and that will help encourage the kind of investment we need to have a more productive economy. Now, it's a very controversial proposal he's coming up with because the Fed has really expanded its balance sheet because of the various crises we faced to the point where it has really gotten out of control. And I think he's come in and say the Federal Reserve really has to return to the core function of central banking, right? Making sure that loans are affordable, but at the same time allocated in a way that goes to more productive investments.
Can I ask, his predecessor, Jerome Powell, came under unprecedented pressure from President Trump, who wanted interest rates lowered. So President Trump has said that he wants Kevin Warsh operating with total independence. What are you going to be watching to see whether or not that independence is in fact real now that we have a new Federal Reserve chairman?
Well, maybe I could reset your question a bit because, first of all, in the history of the United States, there's been no president that has not asked for lower rates. There are famous stories of President Johnson going to the Fed chair during the Vietnam War, shooting up against the wall and saying, "My boys are dying in Vietnam, and you won't let me have lower rates and more money." So President Trump is nowhere near that kind of aggressive bullying. But he has called for lower rates, just as every other president has. And I think the key to whether or not Chair Powell was really subjected to independence questions about policy or about mismanagement is really an open question. I think Chair Powell has decided to stay on at the board because he's being charged with managerial malfeasance, that he's not used the funds that he had been in charge of for the building restructuring and for the Fed budget in general in a wise manner. In the last 20 years, the Federal Reserve mission creep has really grown, and the Federal Reserve has gone well beyond the core of central banking into DEI hiring practices, into climate research, things that doesn't contain, isn't part of the mandate for the central bank. Kevin Warsh is coming in and saying, let's return to the principles of central banking the way Alan Greenspan had expressed it. And I think he will be trying to bring the Fed back into a more narrow focus and keep the Fed away from the financial markets, keep the Fed away from people's everyday lives, because a good central bank should not be something that is in the news all the time. It should be doing its work, keeping prices stable and keeping employment high without making a lot of noise and without making a lot of news. And that's, I think, the objective that Kevin Warsh is coming in with. And as far as independence is concerned, as I said, Chair Powell is not being accused of being dependent on the president for monetary policy settings, but rather he's being accused of not managing his resources wisely and allowing mission creep and cost overruns to come out. So it's really an issue of managerial malfeasance rather than Fed policy independence that's on the line here.
I think Senator Thom Tillis might argue differently given how he held up the new chairmanship. But William Lee, thank you very, very much for bringing us up to date, and we'll be watching, of course, to see how the Federal Reserve moves forward in this economy. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.